Coming up on The World Today. Johnson & Johnson vaccine paused in the United States over rare blood clots. Iran admits the Natanz nuclear site did suffer some damage during the attack on Sunday. Plus, more protests following the shooting to death of Daunte Wright in the United States. A warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on The World Today. I'm Teniola Shoboale. The United States has paused the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine after health agencies reported cases of extremely rare blood clotting. Although the White House says pausing the jabs will not have a significant impact on the country's vaccination drive, it says they are being paused out of an abundance of caution, and the country is on track to continue delivering 3 million vaccinations a day. Those due to be given the Johnson & Johnson vaccine are being rescheduled with other jabs made by Pfizer and Moderna. The Food and Drug Administration said 6 people developed an extremely rare disorder linked to blood clotting. Johnson & Johnson itself says it's delaying vaccine rollout in Europe and is reviewing cases of extremely rare blood clots in a small number of people who have received the jab. Meanwhile, vaccine experts in the UK say they will be keeping a very close eye on the American situation. Now, leading virologist Professor Oyewole Tomori joins us now from Ibadan to discuss more on this. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Well, it seems we're yet to connect to Professor Tomori, but in the meantime, let's take a look at other developments in the COVID-19 pandemic. The outbreak of the South African variant of coronavirus in South London appears to have been triggered by an individual who traveled from Africa in February this year, and that's according to some documents with information on the issue. The link has not been proven beyond doubt, but is the working assumption of contact tracers at this time. The country involved was not on the red list for compulsory hotel isolation at the time, but has now been placed on the list. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
The discovery in the UK comes as Prime Minister Boris Johnson warns that the rapid drop in COVID-19 deaths is largely down to a 3-month lockdown, not the vaccination program, and that cases would rise once again as restrictions ease.
Yes, of course, the vaccination program has helped, but the bulk of the work in reducing the disease has been done by the lockdown. So, as we unlock, the result will inevitably be that we will see more infection. Sadly, we will see more hospitalization and deaths.
Israel is preparing to begin allowing vaccinated groups of tourists into the country next month. All foreign visitors will have to show evidence of a negative PCR COVID test before boarding their flight to Israel. When they land at Ben Gurion Airport near the capital, Tel Aviv, they will need to take a serological test to prove they've been vaccinated. The country shut its borders at the outset of the pandemic in March 2020, but its own vaccination campaign has quickly brought down the number of COVID-19 infections within the country. Turkey's health minister says the country will need stricter COVID restrictions to fight a third peak of the virus. A panel of scientists advising the government on the pandemic is recommending a series of tougher measures to combat the virus. The health minister says there are more contagious variants of coronavirus now dominant in Turkey. Finally, data from the Indian Federal Health Ministry shows that there were 161,736 new COVID-19 cases and 879 deaths in the past 24 hours, adding to the total tally of cases up to over 13.7 million cases and over 171,000 deaths. It is the 8th time within a month and the 7th consecutive day when the New Delhi COVID-19 cases reached more than 100,000.
Let's head back to our top development today, and that's the United States pausing the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine after health agencies reported cases of extremely rare blood clotting. Well, joining us now on the program is leading virologist Professor Oyewale Tumori. He joins us from Ibadan. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So what are your thoughts on the new information about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and its link with extremely rare blood clots?
Yeah, I think we've heard that story before. We had it with Oxford, so we're hearing with Johnson & Johnson now. Just as it went with Oxford, I think they're going to look at the risks and the benefits. And if the benefits far outweigh the risk, then we continue using it. Same thing has happened for Oxford, so I expect the same thing for Johnson & Johnson. Right now, I think they have 6 cases, or a little over 6 cases, out of 6 million. So they're investigating, so we wait for the outcome before we decide.
Professor, I know with the shortage in supply of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, also given almost same side effects like you mentioned, you think other factors such as age, medical history, and even current medications should be considered before receiving the vaccine?
Sure. I think from the experience of the other countries, for example, they found that for the Oxford, they find it is found more in the benefits in the young is not as much as that of the old people, so they restricted that. This one, they're finding it in women between the age of 18 and 48, so they're looking at it to that. I think we need to do something like that in our country. Check how many people are reporting adverse effects. That's one area. It is because there's this openness to report in those countries. That's why they are finding this. We have been in the same situation in Nigeria. How many people have been vaccinated, or the few who are vaccinated? I've actually gone out to tell anybody. I got vaccinated, and I reported back to say I didn't feel anything. But if others are feeling something, it is their duty to report, so as to help us to know which and which group to do. So you are correct. We need to have information to know which age group, which group of people, which condition we need before we can do the vaccination.
And Professor, amid all this, scientists still say the benefits of taking the vaccine still outweigh the risk. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, with the evidence that is before, I say again, I used the Oxford vaccine. The evidence that they showed, they stopped that also. And they looked at it for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And they found that, when you look at it, how many people are getting the side effect? How many people are protected? So you balance that, and that's always the same thing. It is a matter of risk and balances in everything that we do. I used to say something. If you're going to visit somebody who died of a motor accident, you're going to visit that person by riding a motor vehicle. So, so the risks are there, but then you balance it. Am I going to die by going by this, or am I not going to? That's you then look at all the balance and then use that one. It's like I said, 2 people get one kind of disease before using it. 100 people are sick. Are you going to say because of the 2, you won't protect the 100? So that's the risk-benefit analysis. So I still believe that's what we have to do. Everything involved deals on risks and benefits.
Professor, how do we boost confidence in this vaccine with people, though? Firstly, we had the AstraZeneca vaccine being linked to blood clots, and now the Johnson & Johnson, which we're also expecting here in Nigeria. How do we boost confidence in these vaccines that are coming in?
I think we're lucky. Let me put it this way. We are finding these side effects very early in the beginning. I'll give you a good example. Yellow fever has been with us for almost 60, 70, 80 years. It wasn't until about 5 years ago they decided finding out the side effects. And each of us have been using, millions of people have used yellow fever vaccine. And it has protected us from the epidemic. But now in Europe, they're using yellow fever, and they're finding that people are having serious side effects. And because of that, are you going to say we shouldn't use yellow fever in Africa, where the disease will eventually wipe us out if we don't use the vaccine? So in all situations, I think one has to look at the history. What vaccine has there been that has not had side effects? Each of us, your children, my children, have been vaccinated with measles. They've gotten all these other polio and other things, and they're still alive. So that's the balance we need to use in convincing people. Yes, there will be problems, but then it's a balance.
All right, then, Professor Oyewale Tomori, thank you so much for your thoughts on the world today.
My pleasure.
Well, still on the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization is calling on countries to suspend the sale of living wild animals in food markets, as they may be the source of more than 70% of emerging infectious diseases in humans. The guidance, aimed at ensuring the global food system is safe and sustainable, follows a WHO-led mission to Wuhan, China, to investigate the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic.
This is very important because we know that 70% of all viruses and pathogens come from the animal world. Some of them are known, we know, some of them are unknown, so it is quite a serious matter to try, as an emergency measure, to stop selling live wild animals in traditional food markets as a precautionary measure.
To other stories now, Iran has admitted that thousands of machines used to refine nuclear materials were destroyed or damaged in Sunday's attack on the Natanz nuclear site. The country had initially acknowledged that centrifuges that his machines used to refine or enrich the chemical element uranium for use in nuclear energy or potentially nuclear bombs were damaged, but without elaborating. However, speaking on state TV, the head of the Iranian Parliament's Research Center said the damage was extensive. Meanwhile, the country says it has begun 60% uranium enrichment. Well, as Iran continues with its nuclear program and investigates who attacked the nuclear site, the United States has absolved itself in the matter, saying it was not involved in a power outage incident at the facility.
We'll try to get through as many questions as we can possibly get through.
In the attack?
Well, we of course have seen the reports of the incident at the Natanz enrichment facility. The U.S. was not involved in any manner. We have nothing to add on speculation about the causes or the impacts. I will say on your first question, though, we are focused on the discussions that we expect to proceed this Wednesday in Vienna. To the diplomatic discussions that have been taking place and took place last week. We expect them to be difficult and long. We have not been given any indication about a change in participation for these discussions. This morning,
Still ahead on the program. Nollywood star Dwayne Johnson might be taking an interest in politics and run for president if he receives the necessary support. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on The World Today. In the United States, there's been more protests and clashes between the police and protesters in the city of Minneapolis for a second night following the shooting of 20-year-old Daunte Wright. Many defied a curfew in the city of Brooklyn Center and threw objects at police who lashed back with flash grenades and tear gas.
The unrest, which began Sunday night, continued on Monday evening after a group of demonstrators took to the streets to protest the police killing of Daunte Wright. A video uploaded on social media showed riot police running after protesters and rubbish bins set alight on the side of the road. Local media said at least 200 protesters had gathered in southeast Portland in front of the building which houses offices for multiple law enforcement agencies. A curfew came into force at 7 p.m. local time across 4 counties with a huge law enforcement deployment. Riot police fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds of protesters, some of them lobbing rocks, bags of garbage and other projectiles. Daunte's shooting came as the high-profile George Floyd murder trial continues. Officials in Brooklyn Center worked to minimize violent clashes between protesters and riot police late Monday. Amidst the protests were reports of looting and burglaries of about 20 businesses at a nearby shopping center. A nearby discount store was looted and vandalized, but most of the demonstrators drifted away by 10 p.m. local time. As calm was restored, police reported 40 arrests in Brooklyn Center for offenses ranging from curfew violations to rioting charges.
There were some occurrences of looting around the Brooklyn Center area in the city of Minneapolis. It was pretty limited and sporadic in nature, and the Operation Safety Net team was able to respond quickly and quell those areas and take people into custody where they could.
The officer who shot Daunte was named on Monday as 48-year-old Kim Porter, who has worked for Brooklyn Center Police for 26 years. Daunte was pulled over on Sunday for a traffic violation, but there was a struggle when he tried to get back into his car. After drawing her gun, apparently by mistake, Kim Porter exclaimed, "I just shot him." She has been placed on administrative leave, that is, temporary leave with benefits and salary still paid. But Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott says she should be fired.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more on this. Maria, the protests have continued over the shooting of Daunte Wright, and it appears the police is eager to handle this as a mistake. Why will this not be a good idea now to keep repeating that the officer in question fired a gun and not a taser as she intended?
This is a huge mistake because it is definitely going to actually call to question the police chief. And you're going to begin to see those protesters starting to call for his resignation or for him to lose his job, because it is clear that the protesters are very upset about this. And so for him to have said that it was a mistake and you're talking about a man has died, is going to definitely create additional unrest. And what you're going to see even further is you're going to see, more speculations surrounding the fact that, as many of the police analysts have suggested, that tasers are worn on the opposite side of the gun. And so to mistake a gun for a taser would be, they saying, almost unimaginable, because they're on two separate sides of the body when a police officer goes to a scene, and the actual shape of them are very different. And so that is actually creating, I think, even more anxiety in the community and more anger in the community.
And Maria, what are you hearing as regards more protests planned? The ones over the past 2 days have been, quite rowdy, with looting and robberies reported. The police are still trying to keep the peace. Will the large police presence deployed to 4 counties do much to prevent another night of protest? And what do the people want at this point?
Well, I think there's a clear indication. There needs to be a clear difference between protesting and looting and creating damage to the communities. That is not considered peaceful protest. And I think those who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement and those who are in true support of Daunte and his family would say that they're asking for peaceful protest. And so we probably will begin to see some of the looting beginning to die down. I would not be surprised as the weekend approaches and as we get later in the week, you start to see peaceful protests across the country, as we saw with George Floyd, especially as we are in the midst of the Chauvin trial right now, which is just less than 10 miles from the scene of where Daunte was killed. And so you're going to probably see even more coming out, just depending on how the police department responds to this. We know that the individual, the woman that had released the gun fire to Daunte, is on administrative leave. But there's going to be a requirement from the community that the police department takes a harder stand, and they're going to want to see quick action.
All right, then, Maria, a lot to keep our eyes on there. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's check in on the latest from the George Floyd murder trial now. The prosecution today rested on the 12th day in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, and the defense called witnesses to the stand. Former Minneapolis cop Scott Creighton talked about arresting George Floyd in May 2019, 1 year before he died. Earlier, during direct questioning by the defense, a body cam video was played in court showing the 2019 incident. During cross-examination, Eldridge asked Creighton if he had his gun drawn when he approached Mr. Floyd, who was sitting in the passenger side of a vehicle that police pulled over. The police officer who arrested Floyd that year said Floyd was unresponsive and non-compliant to his commands. Floyd was also heard saying in the body cam video, "I don't want to be shot."
And is that something you always do or something about this? No.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says the United States will deploy an additional 500 troops to Germany. He made this known during a visit to Berlin. The move marks a reversal of former President Donald Trump's plan to withdraw about 12,000 troops from the NATO country.
Bedanke ich mich ganz herzlich, und wir werden unsererseits alles daran tun, dass diese 500 Kräfte und die
with Associated Press. Question for each of you. Secretary Austin.
Das ist ein sehr starkes Zeichen auch der Verbundenheit, und dafür bedanke ich mich ganz herzlich, und wir werden unsererseits alles daran tun, dass diese 500.
And now, well, we know anything is possible in this life once you set your heart on it. Well, probably why Fast and Furious star Dwayne Johnson says he would run for U.S. president if he felt he had enough support from Americans. Well, take this. The 48-year-old is one of the highest paid and most popular actors in the United States and has been flirting with a possible White House bid for several years now. The former professional wrestler did not say which party he would represent when he might launch any bid for the White House. Well, his latest remarks follow an online public opinion poll released last week by consumer trends company People Say that found some 46% of Americans would consider voting for Johnson. Well, we'll have to see how that plays out for him. Thank you so much for watching The World Today. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Bye for now.